Gone are the days when unionism in Nigerian universities used to be a thing of pride. It was through unionism that many of our leaders cut their teeth in politicking and public speaking. But all that seems to have been watered down now. In this new book, Breaking Coconut with Your Head by Lanre Arogundade, it seems there is a plan to revive unionism. The book relays Mr. Arogundade's past as a radical students' union leader beginning from the University of Ife and now Obafemi Awolowo University. The book talks about the constant struggles of Nigerian students and how it has paved the way for student unionism, ensuring their rights are fought for and protected. Joining us via Zoom is the author and former NANS, that's National Association of Nigerian Students, President Lanre Arogundade. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I thought you would be outfitted like an aluta, but you are dressing like a bourgeois. What happened?
I'm not surprised to hear that from some of us. I dress like this so that the bourgeois will not appropriate our culture. We comrades to our part, we are interested in promoting our culture.
Amazing.
Right. Now, let's delve into this, your book. Interesting title, by the way, Breaking the Coconut with Your Head. I wonder what informed that and what informed you deciding to write this book?
Well, two things. Well, first about the title, just as I was trying to explain to my friend there, Sam Omaseye, it's just about trying to draw from what we were taught in literature, trying to play around some, image or some imagery. You know, that government, when we were in the NANS leadership in 1984-85, was actually called the Buhari Idi Agbon regime. And Idi Agbon is about the root of the coconut. And I just felt that all we were doing that time, it's like we were confronting the Idi Agbon regime and we were trying to, break that coconut, with our head. The narrative itself, when I started assembling the facts, looking at all we did, and I looked back and I said, what we were doing was aching. So actually, breaking our head with coconuts. For example, leaving the Senate meeting in Benin and driving in a convoy of all the student union leaders of the country straight to Dodam Barracks, and insisting that we wanted to see the head of state just to submit our position on free education. It will have been something unthinkable, but we did it. I think only Fela did something like that. And when we got to the gate at Odam Barracks, the soldiers looked at us and they were wondering, what could be going on? So we said we wanted to see the head of state. We're NANS leaders, we're student union leaders. And then they used their wisdom and said, it's not that easy to see the head of state. We should go to the State House in Marina to see the secretary to the government of the Federation. And then we said, okay, we would like to see the Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters. That was a Brigadier General today, Diagbon himself, and they still advised us. So those kind of narratives, really. But in terms of what informed writing this book, I've been, let's say the journey started over 10 years ago. A lot of members of our generation, current generation, they keep saying, that your era of NANS, they call it the golden era. What really happened? How did you people, wage the battle? So I just felt this is a literature that is needed, maybe to fill some gaps in the narrative. There's a way in which people feel that our generation was so golden that we were made up of angels. And then the current generation is maybe that bad. And when you look at the criticism directed at the youths who came together for NSAS, it was like, they didn't know how to wage struggle. But the truth is that there are no perfect struggles. We also, made our own mistakes. But essentially, I felt that telling this kind of story, there will be one or two things to learn from our own experience. And of course, it would also help to inform the current generation on how to go about dynamic, responsible and very, very radical student unionism.
There was a sense that student unionism at that time was ideologically driven, especially the Marxist socialist ideology, which you actually associated with at that time. I remember I was an active student unionist, but I was not in that your category of socialism and so on. But there was this passion at that time. And at Ife, there was that organization called the Alliance of Progressive Students, APS, that I was on the other side of the pillar. You guys with Femi Falana, Tony Yare, and so on were on that side. But there was an agreement that the administration, the government at that time, was decadent, was authoritarian, and the government had to be confronted. There was an agreement in that level. How would you describe the sense and the passion of that era?
Well, I think the sense and passion was objectively and subjectively determined. Objectively, in the sense that, Sam, if you will recall, we had a very, very enabling environment to run radical student unionism. And this was a time when vice chancellors cannot just suddenly wake up and say, oh, your student union is banned, you are expelled. Come to think of it, I was NANS President for 1 year and 4 months, and I wasn't expelled, I wasn't rusticated. The only thing that happened was that under pressure from the government, the vice chancellor withdrew the secretariat that was given to NANS, and I was asked to leave the campus because I'd already applied for 1 year sabbatical. I think it was also a period when ideas contended. Of course, you said, yes, we were in APS, you were on the other side. But don't forget that even that time, whether you were socialists, whether you were radicals, social clubs like a Club Todmont, they were all bringing discourse into student unionism. If you recall, I don't think a week passed, except maybe during periods of examination, that you didn't have organizations bringing politicians to campus, bringing activists to campus for symposium, for debate. Then we'll all go there, we'll challenge them. They will ask these governors to come and deliver lectures. Then students will question them on their policies in a very fearsome, in a very free atmosphere. You will recall, Sam, that in our period, Rimi came to deliver a lecture at Ife. Jakonde came to deliver a lecture at Ife. In fact, it was the day that Jakonde came to deliver a lecture that some of us knew that his daughter was even a student of the University of Ife.
Yes.
Because when he was about to leave in his Toyota Crown car, we suddenly saw a young girl, and the Jakonde's aides were saying, oh, come and go in our own car. And all those cars were not Jeeps. Jakonde's car was Toyota Crown, his AS504.
I remember.
And then suddenly we knew that the daughter of a governor was with us on campus. Nobody knew because there were no retinue of aides around them. There were no air of arrogance. At the peak of the NANS boycott, we discovered that the daughter of an inspector general of police was a student of the University of Ife. So it was an era of, that was so dynamic that everybody contributed to what was going on. Of course, we played a dominant role as APS, like you said. But again, it was also based on our own belief that, and we were warning then, Sam, that look, if we don't defend the educational system, things will get worse. And it's so ironic that at the time when this book is coming out, we're still having that kind of crisis within the educational system. So we had an enabling environment, and then we were also committed. Maybe we were also helped by the kind of literature that we read even before we came to the university. As I said in my book, I knew about apartheid as a secondary school student because we read 12 Freedom, because we read the other book by, Zuma, I can't remember, Bonabot, something like that. You'll be able to remind me.
Mind Boy.
We read...
Mind Boy.
We read Mind Boy. We read Zambia Shall Be Free.
Yes.
These were literatures we read as from 3, from 4 students. Zambia Shall Be Free. Then we read Ngugi wa Thiong'o. All those literatures, kind of, before we ever got into the university environment, we have been prepared. So we need to take it in totality. I think our success at Ife was also a reflection of what we were made of, even as secondary school students. In my secondary school, Experimental College, for example, we had a flourishing dramatic arts unit to the extent that we staged plays. we staged the Kiriji play, which was based on the Yoruba internecine wars of the 18th or 19th century, and we went around campuses. So we would, in looking back, and that was the epilogue of my book. I said, looking back to look forward. We have to look at how those little things, the kind of education we had, even at the elementary level, prepared us for life in university, and how we got there and were able, to fit in and ideas reigned, as against now when, you have more of the reign of cultists on campuses.
All right, Larry, it looks like when you rise to become the head of a group like that, after your tenure, it looks like subsequent tenures don't seem to have the kind of clout, the kind of teeth, the kind of what it takes to run things the way you would have run it, or at the time that you ran it. I wonder what you see down the line up until now, how the student unionism, especially NANS, and all of that has changed. I recall in my own days also as a unionist, as campaign officer at the level of NANS and also at the level of SUG. If we compare with now, it doesn't seem to be the same. But what do you see when it comes to NANS, the unionism among students now? What is changing?
Well, I think we don't have the kind of ideological commitment and vision that we had, the kind of intellectualism that we brought into the whole process. We're not just criticizing government or demonstrating. We were doing so on the basis of informed knowledge, on the basis of facts, such that even when we went to newsrooms then, the editors, they were ready to listen to us. They felt that, the students are making some points, because we tried to articulate our views. We had what we call the NANS Charter of Demands. But beyond that, for every criticism we made, we tried to back it with facts. And I will just give quickly an example. When the government said then that, free education was not possible because they would need about 6.5 billion naira to fund free education at all levels, as at 1984. To prove that it was possible, we had to do some research. A group of comrades, activists, went to the libraries, studying all kinds of information. And then we discovered that because the Buhari military government then had displaced the Shagari government, the government was automatically saving the salaries and allowances that they were earning as special advisors, as president. We calculated all that, and we arrived at a figure of about 1.2 billion. Then we looked at statements by the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria that talked about import license racketeering, that the Shagari government issued import licenses worth about 11 billion naira, but only goods worth about 2 billion naira were actually imported. And those were import licenses that were backed with cash from government. So we said, even from that alone, we had that. So there was that. Then anytime government presented a budget, we will pick the budget, not just NANS, even individual students' unions. They will look at the budget of the federal government and look at the educational component of it and make an analysis and say whether this government would have. So those were the kind of things that we were doing that I think it's not been done. But let's not forget, however, that the atmosphere actually is also harsher now when it comes to the way people relate, because we had. And then we were running a democratic system because our system was a parliamentary system.
All right.
So we had checks and
Mr.
balances,
Arogundade,
and I think that also helped.
All right, thank you for staying with us. We still have Lanre Arogundade, of the author and former NANS President, speaking to us with regards to his book titled Breaking Coconut with Your Head, and also talking about unionism these days and now. And one issue I'd like for you to address, Mr. Arogundade, is the aspect of the fact that the National Association of Nigerian Students is now said to be a tool in the hands of government instead of, a threat to government as it was those years, trying to see that the government, stood for the students as it was. But now it's now said to be a tool of government. I wonder what you make of that, how we got to this point. And there's also the aspect of they being part of the conversation with regards to advancing issues that border on education for students. Should they have been part of the conversation that ASU have been having with government?
Well, they should really. One of the demands we were making in those days was that students should be represented at all decision-making levels when it comes to educational management in the country. And I think it helps because you then have diverse opinions being put on the table for solutions to be found to them. I think that really helps. Now, talking about the current NANS, I must say that a lot of things are wrong, and this is linked to the previous question I was trying to answer in terms of how what we did differently. I don't understand this idea of student unions calling themselves student union governments. We were not governments, we're just student unions. Because this idea of a student union government has made them to imbibe the worst aspects of our rulership. NANS presidents going about in branded, customized vehicles, NANS 1, NANS 2, and all those kind of things. I really don't understand where it's coming from. That should not really be the case. Sometimes, I meet some of them, they said they're NANS leaders, and people are introducing themselves as personal assistant to the NANS president, special assistant to the NANS president. I mean, this is quite, strange. Unions are just unions. We have Nigerian Labour Congress. They didn't say they are Nigerian Labour government. Because even in activism, even in radicalism, there also has to be elements of, you have to be rational. And so that you don't, lose objectives. I think this idea that they are government means that they are above everybody. They are not accountable to anybody. And that is what we see. But the degeneracy of NANS, we also have to lay the blame where it belongs. I think the military actually contributed, especially under Babangida's regime. They were the ones that started this idea that student unionism would be voluntary. Remember in those days, we pay our fees, our dues to the university. The university collects the student union deals on our behalf. So at the beginning of the session, you already know what the student union is worth. At that time at Ife, based on a population of 10,000, we're collecting 1 naira per student. So what we normally have in the student union account was 10,000 naira. And as executives, because I was secretary of students of a students union, you then have to go to the SRC, the Student Representative Council, the Parliament, to present your budget. If you are going to earn any income above that 10,000, you have to disclose Jim after the setup of the Abisoye and Akambi panels, removed all that. Then at a stage, because they were fighting, radicals or socialists and the leadership of the student union movement, they also sponsored cultists to attack them. And we saw the first phenomenon of that at Ife in 1990 when Adeola Soetan was president. And at a students' congress, a group of cultists moved in to kidnap, to attempt to abduct him. And the fracas led to the death of a student. So invariably, you see elements that look like cultists. Imagine in the NANS leadership, there were some NANS conventions that the stories were that, getting to the venue, they came with different armed groups and they confronted themselves. But perhaps we're also seeing in the degeneracy of NANS and to some extent of student movement, the collapse of values in the larger society itself. Because we can't take the issue of students in isolation. These days, when they want to become, vice chancellor, you have candidates up to 2023. Campaigns are based on ethnic sentiments. In federal universities, people insist that their indigenes must become vice chancellor. As recently as the appointment of a vice chancellor in Ife, we saw the crisis that is generated. So we also have to look at the collapse of values across board. The values even in the political class. In the Second Republic, which we criticize the leaders for, we look back now and we say, compared with what we have now, maybe we were too critical of those people. I mean, we had governors who lived in their personal houses, left government and still go back to their personal houses. In the Second Republic, I don't think there was any senator or member of House of Reps or even House of Assembly, State House of Assembly, that didn't have a pedigree. They were either retired teachers, they were lawyers, they were doctors. You knew who they were. But things have changed. We see a lot of elements in our political something. We didn't know where they're coming from. So in addressing the students' question, I think we also need to address the Nigerian question. But certainly for the students' movement, we need to ask a lot of questions. But like I always say, it's not that totally bad. We still have some few student unions that are doing the right thing. But unfortunately, the level of intolerance is so much. We have a group that try to come together and do the kind of things we're doing at NANS, the likes of education rights campaign, putting together, genuine ideas. I feel that we need to let the government, the authorities in the institutions of higher learning to know that students are part of the process. They need to give independence to the students' union. There's no need for authorities. In those days, you would always know elements who are being supported by the authorities on the basis of the kind of campaign they are running, but not that over a very little issue, they will move in and ban the student union. So let's have that kind of tradition revitalized on campuses. It wasn't just the student union we had at Ife. We had the Students' Judicial Council, which operated like a regular court. The lawyers in the Judicial Council were the law students. And some will recall the disputed election of 1981-82 session between Edi Olafeso and Soji Omole.
Yeah.
Edi Olafeso was backed by we radicals, socialists and activists. Soji Omole was backed by the conservatives, including the Students' Union.
Yeah.
And the campus was split into two.
The Scriptures
So at
Union.
the first ballot, Scriptures Union.
Yeah.
And then at the first ballot, it was difficult, and the election was stalemated because Soji Omole disputed the outcome. For about a week at Ife, nobody was attending lectures. Then they got their lawyers and they went to the Students' Judicial Council. So just like you have the
Tribunal.
election petition tribunals now. I remember the chairman of the Ife Students Judicial Council then was Anthony Digbe, who is now a senior advocate of Nigeria. He was the majestic chairman of the Judicial Council. Yeah. And the two candidates got their lawyers. They quoted legal authorities. And at the end of the day, it was the Judicial Council that upheld the election of Edi Olafeso. Throughout that period, the University administration under Cyril Owumechile didn't interfere in the process. They didn't suspend the Students' Union. They just allowed everybody to be. In the Electoral Commission, there were the likes of Dakwolo Oriyomi, And so we need to allow that. The country will benefit from it because people are now saying, oh, you students, you are not doing anything. But we're not looking at the obstacles being put on their way. I feel we all have a responsibility, and I'm just doing mine, giving this narrative as it happens.
It's a good thing.
Without prejudice.
Yeah, it's a good thing you are telling this story, and I recommend you for that. My sense is that you are saying that it was the Babangida administration that broke this apart. But that is true. But you also recall that during the Shagari administration, the MPN had already started to infiltrate the union. They had a body that was full of very wealthy, by students' standard, they were living, I've forgotten the name of the book, it has something like a green, what do they call them, green palm?
Yes, they were hiding under the kind of a peace movement and
something like that, and they had come.
You are right now.
So we can say that the military administration made the student union to blossom, but it was the military that broke it.
Yes, you are right. It started with Shagari's government. As a matter of fact, my opponents at the Just Convention, where I was elected NANS President, was believed to have been sponsored by the NPN government then, the government of the National Party of Nigeria. In those days, we used to, when we are student union activists, we go by road, we go by train, we join the train at Ibadan by 6 p.m. if you want to go to the northern part of the country. But they came to Jos, they were flown to Jos. And for you to afford a ticket of about return ticket of 40 naira at that time was like 40 would be like 40 million naira today. So it started then. Even attempts to withdraw educational subsidies started with that government because there was a lot of profligacy. They wasted a lot of resources, and that was why even when the Buhari coup came in December 1983, we must put on record that. It was warmly embraced by the Generality of Nigeria. Students trooped out. They were happy because they had seen the worst of a corrupt government. The only thing is that history is probably now teaching us otherwise. So yes, I agree with you. We can't put the entire blame on the military. But under the civilian government, it was difficult for them to succeed. But for the military, it was they were really overrunning everybody.
Yeah.
And that was why we also have to place on record that, student union activists, some of them who had left the campuses to join the pro-democracy movement, to join the media, played a decisive role in ensuring that we had a return to democracy.
Yeah, sorry to cut you short. I remember that during when the Buhari regime just came in, people were saying Happy New Year, Happy New Government.
Yes,
I remember
exactly.
under the buttery, under the Awolowo Hall buttery, you were contending with some people. Say, what do you mean? What do you mean by Happy New Year, Happy New Year? A regime that is filled with generals? I know you're I remember you saying that. But I just want to tell you that there were moments of vanity in the elections, in the union. So sometimes we're trying to over glamorize that period. You remember Ebisheni, when he was running for welfare office, the only thing that gave him the parties was because he said, Great Ife,
was ice cream.
Where has our ice cream gone? That's all.
Exactly.
And then Chris Fajamifo, when he was running, he just said, John Locke said. And that's how nobody knew what John Locke said. And they voted for him.
You are right, Sam. If you follow the trend of my submission, I keep saying we need to have a sense of balance.
Yeah.
Because we were not, and interestingly, it's like you are reviewing the book. What I've tried to do is to give a true account of what happened. The book is not about we radicals, we socialists, it's about what happened. So the example of Shola Ebisheni is in that book. Yeah, and so you see, students, I also gave the example, if you recall, of that our great friend, Ayodele Oji.
Yes.
The guy who, because maybe he was afraid to face the crowd, the press night, the previous day, he was dead drunk.
Yes,
and everybody was calling him Ogogoro Oji.
Yeah.
but at the speech night, the following day, he did the unthinkable. In fact, that speech night was hugely attended.
Yes.
But when he came, people were looking forward to see another display by the Ogogoro Oji. And then this time around, he was wearing the 2-piece suit.
Yes.
And you recall I wore my own 3-piece suit.
Yes.
That's why I'm wearing a 3-piece suit today. And then he stepped forward and he said, oh, Great Ife. Yes, it's true. I was drunk yesterday. I want to apologize. I'm very serious. Then he was carrying a wooden box and he said, oh, this is my suggestion box. And Tune just said, you don't win, you don't win.
Well, Lanre, all the pictures you have painted are really very interesting. And they are a replica of what unionism has been and all of that interest in there. But when it comes to the issue of lessons to learn, you've told the story in the book, Breaking Coconut with Your Head. What are some of the itemized lessons that student union leaders of today will have to learn and pick from the book you are unveiling today?
I think the first lesson they need to learn is that they are accountable to the students that elect them, not to outside interests. And as long as they don't do that, there will always be the problem. So they need to learn that lesson. They also need to learn the lesson that when it comes to confronting government, you also have to be well armed with your facts, with your information. You need to do your research. You need to come from from an informed point of view. One of our slogans on campus then, we used to be that the educator has to be educated. Student union leaders are supposed to be educators, and they need to be educated. Then another lesson is that they need to read. They need to learn. I've mentioned some of the books I read. I can't even mention the books we were reading on campus. At every book fair, we were there, buying all kind of literature and reading them, making criticism, because they need to expand the horizon of their knowledge so that people will not see them as rabble rousers. They need to learn the lesson in being articulate, in being able to present your information. And I would recommend the parliamentary system to all the student unions, because you come there, if you say rubbish, that's where you learn, how to debate. All those lessons. I think if we do them, different generations will produce leaders. Looking at that book, let me say that, well, we didn't achieve all, but I think our generation could be proud of what we've done. We have.
All right, Lanre. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time anymore.
We have run out of time.
Thank you so much.
I know. You gave me extra time. Sam, thank you.
Don't break your head.
Thank you so much.
All right. And the book has been launched today, right?
Yeah, it's been launched today at the event center. I think I can take the liberty of these adverts in just opposite the African Shrine from 11 a.m. There will be coconuts to eat because.
All right, we'll have to leave it here now. Thank you so much.